Assalamualaikum and hello. I am Rahana Arif and my metric number is 252815. Today, in this video, I will discuss more about the mitigating factors and the aggravating factors submitted by the defense counsel and the prosecution respectively. It is the time for the court to pass a sentence towards the accused after having a trial. The court will pass a sentence after considering the seriousness of the offence, a plea of mitigation, and aggravating factors submitted. So, let's start. First of all, what is a plea of mitigation? A plea of mitigation is when the accused, by way of his defense counsel, persuade the learned judge to give more lenient sentence. There are about 8 factors that usually been raised by the defense counsel in order to seek for more lenient sentence, namely the age of the offender, record of offender, plea guilty, the gap principle, condition or circumstances before commission of offence, effects of conviction, and sentence, conduct of offender, and lastly, other factors. Without further ado, let's start with the first mitigating factor is the age of the offender. The court will look at the age of the offender and determine whether the offender is a youthful offender or first offender before imposing sentence. Although in the case of the Kiran bin Taib against PP, the court opined that the first offender between the age of 17 and 21 years old should not be imprisoned, but rather send them to the Henry Gurney School for the benefit and in the long run of the community at large. However, not all learned judges opine so, as in that case, they think that they should be give priority to the aim of punishment and gravity of the offence rather than consider the age of the offender. This could be seen in the case of Koi Teng Som and another against PP, which the Court of Appeal sentenced the two accused aged 17 and 18 years old, which convicted of culpable homicide of Form 5 student under Section 304 of Penal Code with 9 years imprisonment each. It is because the public interest outweighs the mitigating factors compared to the age offender. The offence committed itself is grievous, so the court rarely look at the age offender before imposing sentence, but look at the gravity of the offence. Second mitigating factor is the record of the offender. The court always look at the record of the offender and determine whether the accused is a first offender. The court tends to give lenient sentence if the accused is a first offender. This can be supported with the case of Abdul Karim against R, which the court substitute the sentence of 3 months imprisonment with a fine of 400 ringgit as the accused was a first offender. However, a clean record has no effect in drug trafficking cases. For instance, in the case of PP against O Lang Siu and others, where they held that the death penalty is mandatory for drug trafficking, and no matter whether the accused was a first offender, it is because drug trafficking is a grave offence. So, the record of offender is not that powerful mitigating factor in order to seek for lenient sentence. The third mitigating factor that usually been used by the defense counsel is a plea of guilty. By virtue to that, a plea of guilty is a strong mitigating factor. For instance, in the case of Zaidun Sharif against PP, where the accused was sentenced to a 9 months imprisonment for possession of cannabis weighing 0.04 gram under Section 6 of Dangerous Drug Act 1952 in the Magistrate Court. On the appeal, the High Court substituted the sentence with a fine of 1,500 in default of 6 months imprisonment. Nonetheless, a guilty plea does not necessarily reduce the sentence. It is because the court considered the public interest and the graveness of the offence. This can be supported with the case of Ismail bin Rashid against PP, where the accused pleaded guilty to 2 counts of raping his 14-year-old daughter and was sentenced for 14 years imprisonment. On appeal against the gravity of the sentence, the learned judge stressed that although the accused pleaded guilty, but the case was a classic case which the sentence should not be discounted for the purpose of reflecting society's abhorrence to crimes of this nature. The fourth mitigating factor is the gap principle. The meaning of gap principle is the period between the previous conviction and the present conviction. The longer the gap, the better the accused to use this factor to ask for lenient sentence by the court. It seems like the accused had tried to prevent himself from involved with the same offence. For instance, in the case of Morgan Marutamutu against PP, the learned judge reduced the sentence imposed on the accused as the session court failed to take into account the mitigating effect of the 16 years gap between the previous conviction and the present conviction of the accused for the same offence, which is the drug possession. The fifth mitigating factor is the condition or circumstances before the commencement of the offence. Provocation is one of the circumstances that court usually take into consideration before imposing sentence and acts as the defence to murder case. For instance, in the case of PP against Khairul Faiz bin Mat Dahlan and others, where the court imposed 14 years imprisonment for offence under Section 4 of the Penal Code. Next, drunkenness. The judge also a human, so he will understand if the accused was unconscious due to alcohol that may lead him to commit offence. This can be supported with the case of Raja Izzuddin Shah against PP, where the accused pleaded that he was drunk when he slapped the police officer. The court ordered the accused for bond of good behaviour and pay compensation to the victim instead of being sentenced to 3 years imprisonment. Sixth mitigating factor is effect of conviction and sentence. There are two effects that usually the defence counsel will raise, which the effect on family of the offender and effect on the job and other privilege. Effect of family is when the accused is a sole breadwinner, has children and have to financially support his family. It will be humiliation to the family when their sole breadwinner will be convicted against him. The children will be ashamed of their father if the offender is their father. In the case of Chan Sit Hong against PP, the Court of Appeal substitute 1 year imprisonment with a fine of 2,000 ringgit in default of 3 months imprisonment. For effect on job and other privilege is when the accused might lose his position or reputation as a consequences of the conviction and sentence imposed on him. Defence counsel always use this mitigating factor to ask for light sentence, and sometimes the court will decline the plea and impose deterrent sentence in situation when the accused abused his position of trust while holding a high position. The seventh mitigating factor is conduct of offender. If the accused was a repentant, give good cooperation with police and pay the compensation, the court usually will accept this mitigating factor to impose the lenient sentence. Lastly, the eighth mitigating factor is other factors such as whether the accused is in possession of small quantity of drugs, whether the accused is not a drug addicted, whether the offence involved less dangerous drugs, whether the accused has been in custody before a trial for a longer time, whether the gravity of the type of offence committed is a severe, and whether the accused has any health problem. The court will take into consideration all of these other factors before imposing the sentence towards the accused. So now, let's move to the aggravating factor. The court will ask for the prosecution to submit any reasons to give harsher punishment to the offender after the defence counsel submitting a plea of mitigation. There are 5 aggravating factors that usually been raised by the prosecution in order to persuade the court for imposing heavier sentence, namely prevalence or recency of the offence, previous conviction or bad record of the offender, position or status of the offender, use of force, and lastly, mode of committing offence. For the first aggravating factor, which is the prevalence or recency of the offence, the court most of the time will impose deterrent punishment for the rampant offence such as drug offences, kidnapping, robbery, theft, rape, housebreaking, and firearms. It is because to take into consideration the public interest and safety. If the accused committed rampant offence as stated above and only get light sentence, the society will be traumatized as the accused was not being punished severely. In the case of Low Tim Fat against PP, the accused was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment and 5 strokes of whipping for armed robbery. The learned judge dismissed the appeal against the offence holding that the accused had committed a vicious crime and robbery was rampant, requiring a deterrent sentence. The second aggravating factor is previous conviction or bad record of the offender. The prosecution will prepare the previous bad record and convictions and antecedents of the offender and submit it to the court as supporting evidence to ask for harsher punishment for the accused. For instance, in the case of PP against Jafar bin Daud, the court held that if the accused is a persistent offender of a similar type of offence, then it is interest of justice to pass deterrent sentence towards the accused. The reason is because the accused shall receive deterrent punishment if he had previous conviction. It means that the accused still does not repent or learn from his previous conviction. The third aggravating factor is position or status of the offender. The position or status of the offender would affect the decision of the court in order to impose deterrent sentence as the offence misused his status. In the case of PP against Datuk Tan Ji Siu and another, the accused was the commissioner of the Malacca municipality and was a first offender. The federal court confirmed its decision in Datuk Haji Harun bin Haji Idris case, which the high status of the offender will aggravate the offence. Thus, the federal court set aside the order of acquittal made by the High Court and imposed a fine of 2,000 ringgit after considering the mitigating factors. The fourth aggravating factor is the use of force. When the offender uses force or violence in a committing offence, usually court will impose a heavy sentence and whipping. It is because it gives trauma and suffer to the victim when the offence was committed by way of force. For instance, in the case of PP against Safian bin Abdullah and another, the learned judge imposed the maximum sentence of 14 years old imprisonment when the two accused persons in their early 20s pleaded guilty to culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Finally, the fifth aggravating factor is mode of committing offence. If the offender committed the offence with brutality, the court most of the time will impose a heavier sentence. The reason of it because the action of brutality give bad trauma and wounded to the victim. In conclusion, the court will take into consideration from both mitigating factors and aggravating factors submitted by the defence counsel and the prosecution respectively. By virtue that the learned judge also a human whom had emotions and thoughts same as the accused, thus he will decide thoroughly the sentence that will be imposed towards the accused for the sake of justice towards the victim. Thank you.